My tea had grown cold hours ago, but I hadn't noticed. I sat staring out the window at the gray October sky, watching the rain drum monotonously against the windowsill, like the ticking of that old clock in the living room. Both were faithful witnesses to my loneliness. My name is Eunice Grimshaw. I'm 78 years old, and I've been a widow for 15 years. Sometimes it feels as though I've lived several lives, and now I'm living the last one, quiet and unnoticed by others. My house in Cumberland is the only thing that has remained unchanged. Victorian style, 2 floors, a small garden out back. It used to be so noisy here. Gavin's laughter when he was little, my husband Alfred's voice, music on Sundays. Now there was only the creaking of floorboards and the radio in the kitchen. I rose from my chair, leaning heavily on my cane. My knees were aching again, heralding more rain. Though what did it matter if it was already coming? As I passed the mantelpiece, I paused at a photograph in a simple wooden frame. Alfred on our wedding day, strict suit, neatly combed hair, a slightly embarrassed smile. He'd worked as an engineer at the local factory, a man of few words, but utterly reliable. He used to say, "Not with words, but with deeds." And he'd always lived by that principle. Fixing, building, providing. What would you say, Alfred? I whispered, touching the dusty glass. What would you say about our son now? Gavin was born 2 years after we married. We adored him, loved him dearly, but we tried not to spoil him. At least that's what I thought. He did well at school, was polite, dreamed of becoming an engineer like his father. Everything changed when Alfred got sick. Lung cancer took him quickly and ruthlessly. Gavin was 37 at the time, already working for an insurance company, married to Laura. I thought grief would bring us closer together. But the opposite happened. At the funeral, Gavin was distant. I remember him standing at the graveside, tall, thin, with his father's features but without his inner strength. When they lowered the coffin, I burst into tears. He just stared into the distance, as if what was happening didn't concern him. That evening, after the guests had gone, I asked if everything was all right. "Mom, I'm 40, he replied flatly. "I'm not a child." You can't cling to the past. I didn't realize then that this was the beginning of the end of our closeness, our understanding. 3 years later, Gavin divorced Laura. She was a sweet woman, a little naive, genuinely in love with him. Why they separated, I never fully understood. Gavin said only that they'd grown out of the relationship. They had a son, Keith, who was 10 at the time. Custody was shared, but the boy spent more time with his mother. It was during that period that I began to notice changes in my son. Calls became less frequent, visits shorter. When he did come by, he either sat staring at his phone or talked about work, promotions, bonuses, his new car. I was happy for his successes, but I longed for warmth. One day, I tried to talk to him about it. "Gavin, honey, we've become such strangers," I said, pouring tea. He looked up from his phone screen, puzzled. "What are you talking about, Mom?" "I come, I call. What else do you want?" "Attention, son." "Real attention," he sighed, the way you sigh when dealing with a cranky child. "I have a job, Mom. I have a life. I can't sit here for hours talking about the neighbors or your TV shows." "That's not what I mean." "You know," he interrupted, "you've always been like this, always demanding more than others could give. Dad understood that, but you never did." His words hit me harder than a slap. I said nothing. What could I say? That I'd worked my whole life as a nurse so he could have everything he needed? That I'd denied myself everything when Alfred was sick to pay for the best doctors? That after he died, I was the one who helped Gavin with the down payment on his house? No, I didn't bring it up. A mother shouldn't keep a ledger of good deeds for her own child. As the years went by, I grew used to my son only calling when he needed something, usually money. Either for roof repairs, a vacation to recover from stress, or new furniture. I never said no. Perhaps it was my mistake, for giving too much, giving too much. But isn't that what mothers do? Isn't that what I'd been saving for all these years? Keith, my grandson, was my only ray of light. Unlike his father, he visited often, first with his mother, then on his own when he was older. He helped in the garden, listened to my stories about the past, brought books. He was the one who insisted I learn how to use a smartphone and computer. Grandma, you have to keep up with the times, he said, patiently showing me how to make video calls. Otherwise, the world will pass you by. Thanks to Keith, I mastered not only calling, but social media and online shopping. I even started a gardening blog, my little sanctuary, where I wrote about growing roses. A few dozen subscribers, mostly older women like me, but I enjoyed it. Keith went to university in a neighboring town, studying biology. He came less often, but we made up for it with video calls. He talked about his studies, his girlfriends, his plans. I saw in him what his father lacked: sincerity, kindness, the ability to truly listen. One day last spring, Keith arrived with unexpected news. Grandma, Dad's getting married. I was surprised. After the divorce, Gavin had dated various women, but none of the relationships lasted long. To whom? Jenny, she works at a dental office. They've been seeing each other for a year, but they kept it quiet. Never told anyone? I vaguely remembered my son mentioning a Jenny in one of his occasional phone calls, but I didn't know the details. Is she a good woman? I asked cautiously. Keith shrugged. Normal, a little bossy. She acts differently with Dad than with the rest of us. Sugar sweet, you know. But when she thinks no one's watching, she's a different person. I nodded. I'd known people like that. One face for the chosen few, another for everyone else. Well, if your father's happy, he says he is, but... Keith lowered his voice even though we were alone. I think he's just tired of being alone. Jenny's very persistent. And she has a daughter from her first marriage. She's 18. They're kind of a package deal. I smiled at the metaphor. My clever grandson. People get married for all kinds of reasons, honey. It's not for us to judge. Yeah, but... He hesitated. They want a big wedding. Very expensive. Dad said he was going to ask you to help with the money. There it was. I felt bitter but not surprised. Of course, Gavin hadn't called himself. He'd sent his son to do reconnaissance? Grandma, you don't have to. Keith continued, noticing my reaction. You have your own plans for that money. I brushed it off. What plans at my age? A cruise around the world? I tried to smile. Money is for the living, not the dead. If your father needs help, I'll help. Keith shook his head. Sometimes you're too kind, Grandma. Maybe he was right. But what else could I do? Refuse my only son. Besides, I hoped the wedding would bring us closer together. Maybe Jenny would turn out to be better than Keith described her. Maybe she'd make Gavin happy, and a happy son was all a mother could ask for. Gavin called a week later. His voice sounded strained and overly cheerful, as it always did when he wanted something. Mom, how's your health? You're not sick? I'm fine, son. My joints are a little sore, but that's age. Yes, age, he coughed. Listen, I have news. I've decided to get married. I acted surprised. Really? To whom? Her name's Jenny. She's a wonderful woman. You'll love her. Smart, caring, a great homemaker. I'm happy for you, I said sincerely. When do you plan to get married? He was silent for a moment. In 3 months. I know it's fast, but we don't want to wait. And, you know, Mom? Another pause. We want a beautiful ceremony. Jenny deserves the best. Of course, I agreed. Every bride dreams of a beautiful wedding? Right, and, he coughed again. You know, I've been having financial difficulties this past year. Renovations, the new car. How much do you need, Gavin? I asked him straight out. He gave me a number. I almost dropped the phone. It was 3 times what I'd expected. That's a lot, son. I know, Mom, but it's a wedding. It's a once-in-a-lifetime thing. Well, it's a second for Jenny, but she says the first one was a bust. She wants to do it right. You know, rent the Hilltop Manor, invite 100 guests, live music. Hilltop Manor was the most expensive venue in Cumberland, an old mansion overlooking the lake.
Insanely beautiful, but insanely expensive. 100 guests?
I asked. Do you have that many friends? Well, not just friends. Colleagues, acquaintances, Jenny's relatives. He hesitated. Mom, you'll help, won't you? I'll pay you back. I promise. We both knew he wouldn't. Just like he never paid back the money for the house, the car, the vacation. But I said yes. Because he's my son. Because I hoped this wedding would make a difference. Because what else could I do? Okay, Gavin. I'll help. Thank you, Mom. He sounded genuinely relieved. You're the best. Jenny will be so happy. After that conversation, he called more often. Every week, sometimes twice. Talking about the preparations, about Jenny, about her daughter Abby. It felt like we were getting closer again. I was happy about it, though somewhere deep down, I knew he was only interested in the money. A month later, Gavin arrived with Jenny. She turned out to be a pretty woman with dyed blonde hair, bright makeup, and a flashy manicure. She smiled a lot, but her eyes remained cold. She looked around the house, her gaze lingering on the antique clock and silver tea set. An inheritance from my mother. "What lovely things," she said. "They must be expensive. They belong to my mother," I answered. "Antiques." "Antiques are so valuable now," she said casually. We drank tea and talked about the wedding. Or rather, they talked and I listened. Jenny described the dress, the flowers, the menu. Gavin nodded with the look of someone who'd heard it for the 100th time but still found it fascinating. I asked if there was anything I could do to help besides financing. "Oh, don't worry, Eunice." Jenny patted my arm. "At your age, it's better to rest. The wedding planner and I will take care of everything." "I'm not that infirm," I said. "I could help with seating or—" "It's already planned," she interrupted. "Just come and enjoy yourself." As they drove away, Jenny gave me a dry, formal hug. "We're so glad you'll be at our wedding, Eunice. It means a lot to Gavin." Something in her tone made me wary, like she was doing me a favor by letting me attend my own son's wedding. A wedding I was paying for. After they left, I sat at the window for a long time staring out at the rain. Something told me this wedding wasn't going to bring Gavin or me happiness. But I chased those thoughts away. Maybe I was wrong. Maybe Jenny really did love him. Maybe it was just hard for me to let go of my son, to accept that he'd chosen another woman as the center of his life. Keith called that evening. "How did it go meeting your future daughter-in-law?" "It was fine," I said, not wanting to turn my grandson against his father. "She's energetic," Keith laughed. "That's one word for it. Grandma, be careful. Jenny knows how to charm when she wants something." "I have nothing to give her but money for the wedding," I said, "and I've already promised that." "It's not just about money." Keith's voice became serious. "She wants to control everything around Dad, including you." "I'm hard to control." I smiled. "I'm too old for that." "I hope so," Keith sighed. "Just don't let them use you, okay?" I promised. But I realized even then that something had started, something I couldn't stop. Like a snowball rolling down a mountain, gaining speed and mass. And I was just an observer, powerless to change its trajectory. It was a cloudy morning, but it wasn't raining. A small victory for my aching joints. I walked slowly down the stairs, holding onto the banister. Today was the first meeting with the wedding planner. Gavin had called yesterday saying he'd booked a cab to pick me up at 10 o'clock. "Be ready, Mom. Don't be late. Miss Potter is a very busy person," he'd said hurriedly, as if I were a child. I'd wanted to remind him that I'd never been late once in my entire life. Not to work at the hospital, not to parent-teacher conferences, not to his school concerts. But I didn't. I'd been silent a lot lately in conversations with my son. At 9:30, I was ready. A gray dress with a collar, a pearl brooch, Alfred's gift for our 20th wedding anniversary, and low-heeled shoes. I looked in the mirror and fixed my gray hair in a neat bun. The cab arrived exactly at 10. The ride to Hilltop Manor took 20 minutes. Familiar streets of Cumberland, the city where I'd lived all my life, floated by. The corner store that had once been a bookstore and now sold coffee. The park where little Gavin liked to feed the ducks. The hospital where I'd worked for 35 years. Hilltop Manor greeted me with its stately facade, an 18th-century Georgian mansion surrounded by manicured parkland overlooking the lake. I remembered the check I'd written to Gavin 2 weeks ago and sighed heavily. All my life I'd been saving for a rainy day. Now those savings were slipping through my fingers. Jenny met me at the entrance. Her makeup flawless, her hair styled in waves, her tight beige dress emphasizing her figure. She made me feel old and out of place. "Eunice, finally!" She pecked the air near my cheek. "Miss Potter and I have already started. Come quickly." I wanted to say that I'd arrived at exactly the right time, but again, I remained silent. No need to start the day with bickering. Gavin and a woman in her 40s in an austere suit, presumably Miss Potter, were waiting for us in the spacious hallway with its marble floor and crystal chandeliers. My son looked tense, as if in an important business meeting. He gave me a brief hug and introduced me to the organizer. Mom, this is Veronica Potter, the best wedding coordinator in the county. Veronica, this is my mother, Eunice Grimshaw. Miss Potter explained the concept, an elegant modern wedding with traditional elements. Ceremony on the terrace overlooking the lake, followed by cocktails in the garden and dinner in the main hall. The color scheme, lavender, silver, and white. Alfred, my late husband, was always fond of white roses, I remarked when it came to flowers. Jenny gave me a strange look. We haven't approved roses yet, Eunice. Personally, I'm leaning towards peonies. We stepped out onto a large terrace with white columns. The view was breathtaking. Manicured lawn sloped down to the lake with a light mist overhead. This is where we'll set up the arch for the ceremony. Miss Potter pointed to the center of the terrace. The chairs for the guests will be arranged in a semicircle. After the vows are exchanged, the newlyweds will walk down these stairs to the garden where cocktails will be served. What if it rains? I asked. The weather around here is unpredictable. Jenny rolled her eyes, but Miss Potter patiently replied, We have a backup plan. In case of inclement weather, the ceremony will be held in the music parlor. In the main hall where dinner was planned, Miss Potter unfolded the seating plan. We're proposing 10 rounds of 10, plus a head table for the newlyweds and immediate family. Who will sit at the head table? I asked. Gavin, me, my daughter Abby, my parents, my brother and his wife, and 2 of our closest friends, Jenny answered without looking at me. And me? I asked in surprise. There was an awkward pause. Mom, there are only 10 seats at the head table, Gavin finally said. We thought you'd be more comfortable at a table with your friends. What friends? I was confused. You invited someone I know? Jenny and Gavin looked at each other. Well, we thought you'd tell us who to invite, my son said uncertainly. I didn't name anyone because you didn't ask. My voice shook, and I assumed I'd be sitting next to you, Gavin. I am your mother, after all. Miss Potter coughed, clearly feeling uncomfortable. I'm sure we can revise the seating plan. Perhaps add a seat. No, Jenny quickly intervened. It's already been approved. Symmetry is important for photographs. Eunice, you do realize that a wedding is first and foremost about the couple, don't you? I could feel color flooding my face. Of course the wedding is about the newlyweds. But is it normal for the groom's mother to sit in a corner somewhere with strangers? It's okay, I said, trying to smile. I can sit wherever you want. Gavin exhaled with relief, and Jenny smiled victoriously. Good. Speaking of guests, we've made a tentative list. My relatives, co-workers, friends, a few of Gavin's important clients. How many people are on the list? I asked. 115, Gavin answered, avoiding my gaze. But you said 100? I was stunned. Every additional guest is additional expense. Eunice, don't be so petty, Jenny said dismissively. 15 people won't make a difference. Besides, they're potential investors in Gavin's new project. When the conversation turned to wine selection, I ventured, What about Moet champagne? It's great quality, but not as expensive as Cristal. Jenny looked at me as if I'd suggested serving vinegar to the guests. Moet? Really? At my wedding? I was just suggesting it, I shrugged. After all, it's considerable savings. Eunice, Jenny lowered her voice, if you can't afford to pay for a proper wedding, just say so. The humiliation stung more than anger. I didn't say I couldn't afford it. I merely offered a reasonable alternative. Mom, please, Gavin interjected. Let's trust the professionals. By noon, we were done with the planning and moved to the restaurant for lunch. Jenny immediately ordered a bottle of the most expensive wine on the menu. I mentally counted how many more such gestures I could afford before my savings ran out completely. At lunch, Jenny became more talkative. You know, Eunice, I've always wanted a real wedding. The first time was so modest, town hall, dinner for 20 people. My husband insisted on saving money, but now I can do everything I dreamed of. On my dime, I thought, but only smiled politely. And your dress? Have you picked it out yet? Oh, yes. Jenny's eyes lit up. It's from a designer coming from London. Ivory embroidered with crystals with a 3-meter train. Sounds impressive. What about you, Gavin? Custom-made suit, too, my son said, embarrassed. Well, we're thinking about it. There's a tailor in London. Of course the suit will be bespoke, Jenny interrupted him. You can't show up in a store-bought suit. It's tacky. As the car pulled up in front of my house, Jenny said, "By the way, Eunice, about your outfit. What are you planning to wear?" "I have a blue dress. I wore it to a friend's wedding last year." "Blue?" Her nose wrinkled. "It doesn't really fit our color scheme. You'll have to get something that matches. Silver or very light lavender. And not so old-fashioned. No high collars and brooches." I felt a pang of resentment. My collars and brooches were part of me, part of my style. "All right, I'll think about it." "Don't think about it, do it." Jenny smiled her fake smile. "The pictures have to be perfect." In the evening, I got a call from Keith. "Hi, Grandma." "How was the meeting with the organizer?" "Informative," I replied evasively. "Hilltop Manor is beautiful and crazy expensive. Dad told me you discussed the menu and seating. Did you like their ideas?" "It was luxurious." "Grandma, I know that tone." "What's wrong?" "Nothing much. I just feel a little sidelined. I'm paying for the wedding, but I have no say in the decisions." "I'm not surprised Dad allows it." Keith sounded annoyed. "He's always been soft, but not to this extent. Jenny's spinning him any way she wants." "Maybe he's just in love," I suggested. "People often lose their heads when in love." At 52, after a divorce and 20 years of living on his own? "No, Grandma, it's something else." Jenny's a manipulative woman. "Keith, honey, don't worry. It's their day. Their decision. No, Grandma, it's not right. I'll talk to Dad." "Please don't," I said hastily. "I don't want to cause trouble." "You're not causing trouble. They're the ones being disrespectful. You're paying for all this madness, and they treat you like an unwelcome guest." The next day, the promised estimate from Miss Potter arrived. The final total was 30% higher than originally discussed. It was almost all I had left after decades of saving. Almost everything I could leave Keith as an inheritance. I picked up a pen and signed the consent form, agreeing to all expenses. Maybe at least it would give me back a place in my son's life. The next 2 weeks passed in a feverish pace. Jenny called almost every day with new ideas, demands, and complaints. She didn't like the shade of the tablecloths. The menu had to be changed because of some important guests' allergies. There was a problem with the musicians. One day, she called in a particularly irritated state. "Eunice, did you find the right outfit?" I ordered a dress. "Silver gray, just like you wanted." "Silver gray?" "We said lavender." "No, Jenny, you said silver or very light lavender." "I chose silver, but it's not appropriate. The groom's mom has to wear lavender, and the bride's mom has to wear silver. It's the whole concept." "You didn't mention that before," I remarked, feeling my irritation rising. "The dress is already paid for." "Return it," Jenny said flatly, "and buy a lavender one. I'm sure you can find something suitable in 2 weeks." I took a deep breath, counting to 10. "Jenny, I've already spent a considerable amount of money on this dress. I'm not returning it." "What do you mean you won't?" Her voice rose. "Do you want to ruin the composition? The pictures will look terrible." "I'm sure no one will notice that detail," I said calmly. "I will notice." There was a sound like Jenny hitting the table. "Eunice, if you really want to support Gavin, you will do as I ask." I closed my eyes. This was it. The manipulation Keith was talking about. Jenny was using my son as leverage. "Okay," I gave in. "I'll see what I can do." "Great." Jenny's tone instantly changed to sweet. "I knew you'd understand. I'll send you links to some good options." 5 minutes later, my phone was blowing up with alerts. Jenny had sent links to dresses from boutiques in London. All of them cost at least 3 times what I'd already spent, and they all looked too youthful for a woman my age. Deep necklines, open shoulders, sequins. I didn't call her right away. Instead, I went to the mall in the next town and spent the whole day going from store to store. Finally, I found a modest dress in a soft lavender shade with long sleeves and a stand-up collar. It was elegant, age-appropriate, and color-appropriate. I took a picture and sent it to Jenny. The reply came in a minute. "It looks like funeral clothes for an elderly nun. Can't you find something stylish?" I stared at the phone screen, feeling my cheeks burn with humiliation. The saleswoman standing next to me cast a sympathetic glance. "Having trouble choosing, ma'am?" she asked politely. "You could say that," I sighed. My future daughter-in-law thinks I should look like a 20-year-old at her wedding. The saleswoman smiled understandingly. I have something that might fit. It's from the new collection, not yet on display. She brought out a lavender-colored dress with silver trim. It was elegant, with three-quarter sleeves and a moderate but not old-fashioned collar, just below the knee, made of light chiffon. Nothing fancy but beautiful. It's beautiful, I said sincerely. May I try it on? The dress fit perfectly. I took a picture in the fitting room and sent it to Jenny with a quick message. How about this? It took a while for a reply. Finally, the phone beeped. It'll do. But the accessories have to be silver. No pearls or old-fashioned brooches. I showed the message to the saleswoman. She rolled her eyes. Your daughter-in-law sounds like a true treasure, she said ironically. She's energetic, I replied diplomatically. We have some great silver accessories. She pointed to a display case. I can find something to match your dress. In the end, I bought both the dress and a set of silver jewelry, a modest necklace and earrings with small amethysts. They harmonized with the lavender hue of the dress and looked modern enough to satisfy Jenny. In the evening, Gavin called. His voice sounded strained. Mom, did you talk to Jenny today? Yes, about the dress, I replied. It's already decided. I bought something she liked. Good, he exhaled with relief. She's been freaking out about it all day. You know, the wedding is in 3 weeks. Everyone's nerves are on edge. I understand, I said softly. Look, Mom. He was quiet. I know that Jenny can be demanding, but she just has her own vision. She wants everything to be perfect. Of course, I agreed. And also, he hesitated again, we were thinking maybe you shouldn't come to the rehearsal the night before. It'll be very hectic, and it's hard for you with your knees to stand for long periods. I felt my heart squeeze. I was being excluded from another part of the wedding. Whatever you say. Gavin. My voice sounded steady, though inside I was seething with resentment. Thank you, Mom. You're the best. He was obviously glad the conversation had gone without conflict. I'll send you a cab on the wedding day. After the call, I sat in the chair for a long time, staring out the window. It was getting darker outside, and my reflection in the glass became more distinct, a gray-haired woman with tired eyes. When did I turn into someone my own son is embarrassed by? A week before the wedding, Jenny organized a bachelorette party. I wasn't invited, of course. I found out by accident when I called Gavin, and he said he was busy with friends at the pub because the girls had taken over the house for their party. I felt particularly lonely that night. I dialed Keith's number. Grandma, he answered cheerfully. I was just about to call you. How are you? Fine. I tried to smile, though he couldn't see it. How's school? It's okay. Listen, I was wondering, are you coming to the rehearsal for the wedding? No, I answered. Gavin said it would be hectic and I'd better come straight to the ceremony. There was a pause. Oh, Keith's voice turned cold. And you said yes? What was I supposed to do? Tell him that you're the mother of the groom and you have the right to attend the rehearsal for the wedding you're paying for. Keith exclaimed. Grandma, they're just using you. They want your money, but they don't want you. His words hurt, even though I knew he was telling the truth. Keith. At the appointed time, the cab pulled up. I checked the wedding gift one last time. An envelope with a check for a substantial sum, tied with a silver ribbon, and left the house. The drive to Hilltop Manor seemed shorter than last time. Or maybe I was just immersed in my own thoughts. When I got out of the cab, I saw that guests were already gathering on the terrace. The weather was beautiful, sunny but not hot, a light breeze ruffling the leaves. I headed toward the entrance, my heart pounding. There was a day ahead that could be the beginning of a new relationship with my son and his wife, or the final confirmation that I was nothing more than an ATM machine. With gray hair to them, I woke with the first rays of sun. It was a clear day outside my window, as if nature itself had decided to provide perfect weather for my son's wedding. Against Gavin's advice not to arrive early, I decided to go to Hilltop Manor 2 hours before the ceremony officially began. It wasn't out of stubbornness. I just wanted to help, to be useful, to feel part of this big day. I booked a cab for 9 in the morning, even though guests weren't expected until 11. As the driver loaded my small purse into the trunk, I looked around at my house. Somehow it felt like I was going away for a long time, even though I'd planned to return in the evening. A strange premonition pricked my heart, but I brushed it away. "It's a beautiful day for a wedding," the driver remarked as we pulled onto the road. "Yes, the weather is beautiful," I agreed, smoothing the folds of my lavender dress. "Are you the mother of the bride?" "The groom," I corrected. "Oh, you must be very excited. Sons, they're special to mothers." I just nodded, not wanting to go into the complexities of our relationship. Instead, I stared out the window at the Cumberland landscape, wondering how Gavin's life would change after today. Would he be happier? Would he find a true partner in Jenny? And would I be able to find my place in their new family? Hilltop Manor was already bustling with preparations when we pulled up. Delivery vans were parked in the driveway. Workers were installing additional lighting. Florists were carrying baskets of flowers. I paid the cabbie and headed toward the main entrance, feeling a little awkward. Maybe Gavin was right. Maybe I shouldn't have arrived so early. In the lobby, I ran into Miss Potter, who looked both collected and slightly anxious. When she saw me, she raised her eyebrows in surprise. "Mrs. Grimshaw, you're very early. The ceremony isn't until 11:30. "I know," I smiled. "I thought I might be able to help. It is my son's wedding, after all." Miss Potter glanced at her watch. "That's very nice of you, but we have everything under control. The guests will start arriving in 2 hours. Perhaps you'd like to rest in the library? It's quiet there, and there's a lovely view of the garden." I realized I was being politely dismissed, but I decided not to give in so easily. "Where's Gavin? I'd like to congratulate him before the ceremony." "Mr. Grimshaw is preparing in the East Wing, but he asked not to be disturbed before the event. Pre-wedding jitters, you understand?" I nodded, though I squirmed inside. My own son didn't want to see me before the most important moment of his life. Was I really that burdensome to him? "And Jenny?" I asked, already knowing the answer. "Miss Malcolm and her friends are in the West Wing. They're finishing their makeup and hair, strictly female company." Miss Potter smiled professionally. "Why don't you have a cup of tea in the library?" "I'll send someone when it's time to take seats," giving in. I allowed myself to be escorted into the library, an elegant room with bookcases to the ceiling and comfortable armchairs by the window. As soon as the door closed behind Miss Potter, I felt trapped, isolated from the celebration I'd paid for myself. 20 minutes later, a young waitress stopped by with tea and cookies. I thanked her and asked how the preparations were going. "Very busy, ma'am," she replied. "The bride has already changed the arrangement of the flowers in the main hall twice, and there seems to be some problem with the cake, the wrong shade of frosting." "Really?" I couldn't hide my surprise. "The pastry chef is one of the most expensive." "Yes, ma'am. But Miss Malcolm is very precise in her wishes." The girl was obviously choosing her words. "She wants everything to be perfect." After the waitress left, I went to the window. It overlooked the terrace where the archway for the ceremony was almost finished. White chairs stood in neat rows with a petal-strewn path between them. Everything looked immaculate, and all without my involvement. I decided not to sit in the library until the guests arrived. After all, I'd paid for this wedding and had a right to see how the preparations were going. Stepping out into the hallway, I headed toward the main hall where the dinner was to be held. The hall had been transformed since my last visit. Tables covered with snow-white tablecloths, set with silver and crystal, decorated with arrangements of lavender and white flowers. At each place was a card with the name of the guest. I found my table in the farthest corner, just as I'd expected, near the exit to the kitchen. I smiled grimly. "Symbolic. Mrs. Grimshaw," a man's voice called out. I turned and saw a young man in a suit, one of Miss Potter's assistants. "The guests are beginning to arrive. Miss Potter said you should take your seat for the ceremony." I glanced at my watch. Time had passed more quickly than I'd thought. As I stepped out onto the terrace, I saw that the first guests were indeed being seated. The master of ceremonies pointed me to a seat in the front row, the only consolation of the day. At least I'd be close to Gavin during the exchange of vows. Gradually, all the seats filled up. I stole glances at the guests, mostly people younger than me, many obviously wealthy, judging by their outfits and jewelry. I recognized Jenny's relatives from the family resemblance, The same confident posture, the same appraising glances. Finally, the music started and Gavin walked down the aisle in an elegant suit that must have cost a fortune. He looked tense but handsome. My heart filled with pride, no matter what. His best man, a co-worker I'd seen a couple times at corporate parties, stood next to him. Gavin looked around at the crowd, and for a second our eyes met. I smiled and waved lightly. He nodded back, but then looked away, as if embarrassed. The music changed. The guests rose, and Jenny moved slowly down the aisle. I had to admit she looked stunning. Her ivory gown, embroidered with crystals, was perfectly fitted, the train trailing behind her like a sparkling brook. Her face shone with triumph. She'd gotten everything she wanted. The ceremony was flawless. The exchange of vows, the exchange of rings, the first kiss as husband and wife, all exactly as scripted. I furtively wiped away a tear as Gavin recited his vows. Despite everything, I was happy for him, or wanted to be happy. After the ceremony, the guests moved to the garden for cocktails. I kept a little to the side, watching Gavin and Jenny accept congratulations. A few people came up to me, introduced themselves, made polite small talk, and stepped away. I felt like a stranger at this celebration of life. Suddenly, someone called out to me, "Grandma!" I turned and saw Keith hurrying toward me through the crowd. My grandson looked all grown up in an austere suit, his hair slicked back. "Finally found you." He hugged me tightly. "How are you?" "I'm fine, honey." I leaned into him for a moment. "You look very handsome today, and you look stunning." He pulled away, looking me over. "That dress really suits you." "Thank you." Jenny picked it out. Keith grinned. "Of course she did. Listen, have you been introduced to her relatives yet? They're sitting in a separate group by the fountain, like royalty." "No," I shook my head, "but I didn't expect them to. The newlyweds have a lot on their minds today." "Busy?" Keith snorted. "All Jenny does is pose for pictures and accept compliments. She could have taken a minute to introduce you to her family." "Keith." I glanced at him warningly. "Let's not. It's their wedding day. We don't want to overshadow it." He nodded, but I could see he was barely holding back. "All right, Grandma, but I'll stay with you. I don't want you to be alone." "Honey, you have your own company." I nodded toward a group of young men, clearly Keith's friends. "Go have fun." "I'm fine." He reluctantly agreed, but before he left, he whispered, "If you need anything, call me right away." Left alone, I decided to walk through the garden. Everything was decorated with impeccable taste. Fountains, flower arrangements, lights ready to shine in the evening. The cost of all this splendor made me shudder inwardly, but I reminded myself that I'd done it for Gavin. The newlyweds' photo shoot seemed to last forever. The photographer commanded them like a general on parade, forcing them into various poses against the picturesque backdrop of the estate. I watched from a distance, hesitating to approach. At some point, they started taking group photos with relatives. I wasn't invited. I saw Jenny hugging her parents, Gavin shaking hands with her father. My son was surrounded by a new family, with no room for me. Finally, the gong rang, inviting guests to dinner. I found my table in the far corner of the hall. A few older guests were sitting at it. I figured they were Jenny's distant relatives who hadn't been given seats at the main table either. We introduced ourselves politely, exchanged a few sentences about the weather and the beauty of the ceremony. The dinner was exquisite, the wines expensive, the service impeccable. But I barely noticed the taste of the food. All my attention was on the main table where Gavin and Jenny sat, surrounded by her relatives, laughing and chatting like old friends. Not once during the entire dinner did. "Shut up!" she shouted so loudly that several guests on the terrace turned around. "I know what you're doing. You've always done this. Gavin told me how you controlled him all his life, how you smothered him with your care." I felt the blood drain from my face. "My son said that?" "It's not true," I said quietly. "I only ever wanted the best for him." "The best?" Jenny snorted contemptuously. "You wanted him to always depend on you. But now he has me, and your manipulations won't work anymore." By now, a small crowd had gathered around us. I could see the shocked faces of the guests, hear the whispers. The humiliation stung more than anger. "Jenny, please!" I took a step toward her, holding out my hand. "Let's not make a scene." "This is your day. Don't touch me!" She recoiled. And yes, it is my day. A day you're trying to ruin with your presence. Gavin appeared in the doorway, alarmed by the commotion. What's going on? He looked from me to Jenny. Your mother, Jenny exclaimed, pointing a trembling finger at me. She came out here on purpose to disrupt the cake cutting, so everyone would be looking for her instead of enjoying the party. Mom. Gavin turned to me, his eyes not understanding but annoyed. Why are you here? Everyone's waiting. I was just getting some air, I repeated, tears welling in my throat. I didn't know they were looking for you for the cake. See? Jenny clutched Gavin's arm. She's in denial. Typical passive aggression. She always does that. You said so yourself. I looked at my son in despair, expecting him to refute her words, to say he'd never said such a thing, but he was silent. And that silence was more eloquent than any words. Gavin. My voice was barely audible. Do you really think so? He averted his eyes. Mom, let's not do this now. Just go back to the hall. We'll forget this incident. Forget? Jenny raised her voice even more. She's been ruining our day since this morning. I don't want her to stay. I don't want to see her in our cake photos. Gavin looked helplessly at me, then at Jenny, then back at me. I could see him agonizingly trying to find a way out of the situation. Jenny, maybe you could calm down a little, he started. No, she stomped her foot like a cranky child. I will not calm down. I want her gone, now! You're not welcome, she literally shouted in my face. Go away. There was silence. The guests froze, not knowing where to look. I looked at my son, expecting him to stand up for me, to say that his mother couldn't be an unwanted guest at his wedding. But he remained silent, his eyes downcast. Gavin? My voice trembled. He looked up, and I saw no love in his eyes, no gratitude, only weariness and frustration. Maybe you really should go, Mom, he said quietly. You've already seen the ceremony, and Jenny is upset. I felt something inside me snap. The last thread that connected me to my son snapped with an almost audible sound. Okay, I straightened, gathering the last shreds of dignity I had. I'll leave. Congratulations to both of you. I walked slowly toward the exit, feeling the stares of shocked guests. No one stopped me. No one said a word. Only Keith, who had appeared in the doorway, tried to approach. But I shook my head. I didn't want him to fight with his father over me. In the check room, I took my purse and shawl. The doorman hailed me a cab, avoiding eye contact. Apparently, news of the scandal had spread instantly. While I waited for the car, Miss Potter came up to me. Mrs. Grimshaw, she looked genuinely concerned. I'm so sorry about this. Perhaps in the morning when everyone has calmed down. It's all right, Miss Potter, I interrupted. Some things can't be fixed with apologies. But the bills, she faltered. The final accounting, we'll talk about that tomorrow. I smiled tiredly. Right now, I just want to get home. The cab arrived 10 minutes later. As I drove away, I took one last look at the lighted windows of Hilltop Manor. There, the festivities continued. The music, the laughter, without me. As if I had never existed in Gavin's life. The morning after the wedding, I woke late. My body ached like I'd run a marathon, even though I hadn't physically done anything strenuous yesterday. Emotional exhaustion, that's what it was. In the first seconds after waking, I thought everything that had happened was just a bad dream. But reality quickly returned. My son had allowed his new wife to kick me out of the wedding I'd paid for. I made myself some tea, though I had no appetite. My cell phone, turned off last night, lay on the kitchen table. I hesitated before turning it on. I didn't want to hear apologies, much less accusations. But I realized that sooner or later, I'd have to face the consequences of my decision not to pay the rest of the bills. My phone buzzed, downloading messages. 12 missed calls and 8 messages. Most from Gavin, a couple from Keith, and one from an unfamiliar number, probably Miss Potter. I decided to read the messages first. Mom, we need to talk. Call me when you see this. The first message from Gavin, sent late last night, why aren't you answering? It's urgent. The second from him an hour later, Grandma, are you okay? Please answer. From Keith, sent around midnight. The other messages from Gavin grew more insistent and irritated. Mom, there's a billing problem here. Administration says you refuse to pay the balance. Is this some kind of misunderstanding? Call me back immediately. Do you realize the situation you've put us in? The last message came just a few minutes ago. On my way to your place. I'll be there in 30 minutes, I sighed. So Gavin would be here soon. I wondered what kind of words he'd walk in with, apology or accusation. I already knew the answer. Though, as I cleaned myself up, washing my face, brushing my hair, putting on my house dress, a plan was forming in my head. No, I wouldn't pay for the rest of the wedding. But it wasn't just about the money. I wasn't going to let myself be used anymore. Manipulated through guilt or maternal duty. Enough was enough. Exactly 25 minutes later, the doorbell rang, sharp, insistent. I opened it and saw Gavin. He looked exhausted, wrinkled shirt, circles under his eyes, disheveled hair. But what struck me most was the look on his face. Not remorse, but anger. Finally. He blurted, walking uninvited into the house. Why didn't you answer the phone? Do you have any idea what you've done? I closed the door and turned to him, calm. Hello, Gavin. It's good to see you too. Mom, this is no time for sarcasm. He ran his hand nervously through his hair. We're in serious trouble. The Hilltop Manor administration says you've refused to pay the balance for the wedding. They're demanding the full amount by the end of the day or they'll sue. I raised an eyebrow. What do you mean I refused? Gavin stared at me in bewilderment. You have to pay. You promised? I promised to pay for my son's wedding where I would be a welcome guest, I said calmly. But as your wife made clear, I was not welcome. And you agreed with that. Gavin blushed, not with shame, but with anger. Mom, you're a grown woman. Jenny was nervous, drank champagne, said too much. It happens at weddings. You can't just go and sabotage, financial sabotage. I chuckled involuntarily. That's an interesting way of putting it. What do you call letting your wife publicly humiliate your mother? What do you call taking her side? I didn't take sides, he raised his voice. I was trying to diffuse the situation. By sending me home? I finished for him. A very effective way of doing that. Gavin rushed over to the couch and sank heavily onto it, wrapping his arms around his head. Mom, please. I haven't slept all night. Jenny is hysterical. Her parents are furious. If the bills aren't paid, it'll be a scandal for the whole town. Think of my reputation. Did you think about my feelings when you let Jenny kick me out? I asked quietly. He looked up at me, and a shadow flashed in his